Welcome back to the channel, fellow aviators, to episode 3 of our on-air career. At the conclusion of our last episode, I had mentioned that today we would move over from our onboarding or freelance pilot mode to the advanced mode, which would start our actual company. But I think I'm going to delay just one more episode, and the reason is there is a couple things I would like to address. Let's come over to the Browse Logistics Center. And the very first thing we want to address is minimum airport size. This is a selectable value. When I came over from Cartagena to Tucumán here in Panama, I used minimum airport size of 5. And the issue with that is when we take a look, let's arrange by distance, we can see that the smallest flight or shortest flight is 293 nautical miles. And it just goes on from there. 293, we got 642, all the way up to 738. And the issue is, if you are starting off in a small aircraft, these flights may be prohibitively long. So let's go ahead and select down to 1. Now rerun the numbers. And we can see that the shortest flight is only 12 nautical miles. Much easier to complete if you're on a limited time. And a little bit more, maybe more realistic, right? We're probably not going out on a 700-800 mile flight in our Cessna 172. The other thing I want to draw your attention to is, we look over here on the left side of the screen, these numbers, 1, 1, 4, 2, those represent how many legs are in the mission. Let's click on the plus side, and now we see this is our flight. From our current airport to Mike Papa Echo Juliet, unload. Then the next mission will be from Mike Papa Echo Juliet to Mike Papa Mike Golf. Another tip, if we click on the F, and I mentioned this multiple times, I think in the first 2 episodes about running out of gas, which can be an issue. This is our FBO service availability tab. And this tells us not only how much gas is available or any other services, but the price. So we can see from Mike Papa Echo Juliet, sorry, these numbers are a little bit crazy. We have over 250,000 gallons of avgas, 100 low lead, at a price of $10.29 credits. When we get to our next destination, Mike Papa Tango Oscar, we've got 86,000, but it's 614, right? And as I mentioned, in this mode, we don't have to worry about gas. It's paid for by the on-air boarding process. But once we start our own company, we'll be responsible, since we have a dry lease on the aircraft, of providing our own gas. So let's come back out here and let's accept the flight. As always, we can either abandon it if we've made a mistake, we can show the legs, or let's just go right into the Fly Now tab. The other thing I'd like to address, and I think I mentioned this in the last episode, is I said SIM brief is going to be required for on-air, and that's actually not true. That's probably some old information I got from when I was flying 2020, and I just simply assumed that was the case. But we have our own charting system in Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024, and so that's what I'm going to use for this flight. I'm not going to use SimBrief at all. Of course, I think it's better. I think the charts are much better in SimBrief. SimBrief will be required if you want to run beyond ATC or say intentions, but for this flight, we're not going to do that. So this is a very small flight, and so we'll just go directly to validate fuel and payload. Fly now. And we will launch the tracking. Okay, we're already tracked. Now, let me rejoin you at the end of the runway as we're just getting ready to take off, as I don't want these episodes to run exceptionally long. I'm still flying the Bonanza. If you need any more tips on it, let me know down in the description. But for now, let's just get moving, and I will join you at the end of the runway as we get ready for takeoff. We're on the runway. I have an altitude of 3,500 feet set in. I've got a climb out speed of 100 knots. First notch of flaps is in for takeoff. I have our approach, which we're going to be doing the visual into runway 36. I'll set up since it's a fairly short flight, and I think now it is time to go. All right, let's see if I can keep us on center line like a professional. .75 knots.
Airborne time logged.
Positive rate, gear up. Already coming up on 100 knots. Flaps up. Let's put on. And let's hit our autopilot. See downtown Panama right over there in just a second. Go ahead and start a turn. Another crazy week in aviation. Recording this a couple days after that Delta Connection CRJ 900 crash out in Toronto. I had assumed, like everybody else, the day of, they must have got hit with a pretty strong crosswind on landing. And we'll see what they say, but that does not, in fact, look to be the case. Simply did not flare at the very bottom. And there may be some other causal factors. That gear may have not been up to speed. But right now, I'd have to say it looks like it's going to be a pilot issue. So, as always, feel bad for the pilots involved. All right, see if we can get ourselves on course here. Let's come down to the lower panel, close up the cowl flaps. Let's switch over to nav, I think, now. Sync up our runway heading, or our heading bug, sorry. So, yeah, it looks like the pilot simply did not flare when they landed, which I actually had happen to me, my very first flight as a captain. And as you can imagine, I was pretty nervous. And I was basing out of Miami, and I'd been to Miami maybe just a couple times. I'd never flown out of there, really. But I thought, well, at least, my FO will know what he's doing. Of course he didn't. He was actually picking up some open time, and he had flown out of Vegas, and he had just gotten off of OE, which is operational experience. So completely brand new to the aircraft and new to Miami. So no help whatsoever. So it's not a big deal. I let him take the first leg. We're flying from Miami up to LaGuardia, very short runway. And we get up there, and it's not overly complicated. I think it's actually relatively easy, because they're going to call your airspeeds for you, so you don't have to worry about energy management. Anyways, we make the approach. Everything looks good, and then he just never flared. I caught it at like maybe the last second, maybe. Um, as you can imagine, coming in, you know, at the airspeed and rate of descent we're coming at, and you're supposed to start your flare around 30 feet or so, it doesn't give you a whole lot of time to react. And of course, I was brand new captain. I was completely unprepared for my FO, simply not doing anything. So that was interesting. So it does happen. But you know, maybe they got a wind shear or gust event, and because it does look like the sink rate increases slightly just before they hit, but who knows? We'll find out in a couple days. But obviously, not good. All right, let's come down here. As you see, I put in the straight approach. I've demonstrated this in other videos before, but there might be some new subscribers. So I think maybe on the way back, I'll show how to put that in. And it's really a great feature. It means, especially if you're flying at a lot of these smaller airports that don't necessarily have an instrument approach, it's a way for you to get down and in fairly simply using the onboard guidance. The only thing it's not going to give you, of course, is obstacle avoidance or clearance. So, but if I remember, I'll do that on the next leg back so we can check that out. But this is a very short flight, which is the whole point. We're already only about 6 minutes out. Come back, I'm sorry, one more time over to here. We can see our top of descent is in 3 minutes. And using the typical 3-degree approach, approximately 942 or 1,000 feet per minute if we don't get the vertical capture, which I will demonstrate. One thing I did not know about Panama, as I've made a couple flights out here between episodes, is actually how hilly it is. The last time I was in Panama, I know I mentioned in the previous episode I was looking forward to going potentially on a medical mission at the end of this year, but the last time I was here was when I was flying off the back of a tuna boat, and we were on this side, on the Pacific side, and we were moving the ship over to the Gulf of America, and we had to bring it through the canal. So that was pretty cool. All right, so let's come back one more time over here, sorry, and we can look at our altitudes here. So the final approach fix is 848 feet. So we'll come over to our main PFD, and we'll go ahead and dial in descent rate of a bottom altitude of 800 feet. That looks good. You can just see that white diamond. I'll mark that up when I do the editing. That's what we're actually looking for. As we come once again back over to this side, or see if I can just look, and 2 more minutes. 2 minutes for top of D. I can see why they built the canal through here. Obviously, it's the shortest point, and looks like there's a lot of these natural lakes. So I think we arrived, gosh, I'm trying to remember, it's a long time ago. I think we came in at night, and then moved the helicopter off the boat, and then they put it through the canal without me. And then I took the helicopter, put it back on the boat, or flew it to Panama City, and then put it back on the boat. All right, 1 minute to go. And as we do that, we're almost there already. So I'm just going to go ahead and start pulling back a little bit of our power. We can start slowing up just a bit. On the Bonanza, the A36, the very first flap speed, or VFE, is 154 knots. For our second notch of flaps, it'll be 124. So before we start heading downhill, as we see the diamonds already starting to come down, we have a 1 dot deflection now. Let's come back over here, and from here, we are going to want to switch out, off, VNAV mode on, and when we come over here, we will have vertical path up at the top of the PFD, which I will highlight, sync up the heading bug. And now, as the diamond crosses, we get the vertical path illuminated. We see we're starting to head down. I'll pull out a little bit more power so we don't accelerate too much. And now the GPS is basically going to help us fly the approach. So you can do this with any airport that's in the database, which is a really nifty feature. As we look down at our PFD, we can see that we have another 4 miles before we hit the final approach fix, and then from there another 2 miles before we get to the runway. So we'll just bring in a little bit more power. 12, 13 on the manifold pressure. And then just before we get there, we will put in our first notch of flaps. I know Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024 gets a lot of crap for the way it was released, and it probably should. But I was doing a flight, I think yesterday. It was actually, I was doing this flight, but I managed to delete all the information before I could get it published. So, but I was doing a flight, and I noticed that there were small villages out in the middle of nowhere with a very small road. All right, about 2 miles out, let's bring in our first notch of flaps. All right, coming in. Starting our turn, continuing on down from 1,800 down, now down to 800 feet. And there's our runway. What we're going to want to do is get ourselves completely set up, trimmed out, before we disconnect the autopilot. It's my little tip to assist you in your landings. All right, about 600 feet to go. Let's bring in our gear down. And our last notch of flaps. And now we're going to start bringing a little bit of power. We're going to want to get an approach speed around 80 knots or so. For 800. It's going to kick us off right around 840. It's going to actually not kick us off. It's going to want us to start leveling out. There we go. Alt V. All right, coming up on 84 knots, you can see the aircraft there starts to want to begin to level out. So we'll just kick off the autopilot right about there. We still have our boxes down on our PFD for some sort of guidance if we need it. Don't really think we do, but maybe if we're in a little worse weather. A little bit of a shallow approach angle, so I'm going to level out regardless of what the boxes say, just a little bit. As I do that, just bringing in a little bit of power. Don't want to slow up too much yet. That looks a little bit better. On 80 knots, that looks good. Now I'm just kind of checking out my vertical descent rate, 250. Definitely a little bit shallow. There we go, that looks good. Rounding out the flare just a bit.
Landing time logged.
That was horrible, but you know what I realized as I was landing, I never secured my yoke. That's why I appreciate the applause. That is from a program called FS Realistic. As y'all know, I run that. A distinctly Latin American trait that they do. I started pulling back on the yoke and I realized the whole yoke was coming with me. Violating the 7 Ps, which is prior proper planning prevents piss poor performance. But we made it work. Landing was not super great after I was talking y'all in how great I was going to do. And what I actually would like to demonstrate the most here is, as I'm tightening my yoke in before I forget, is we can, at this point, we'll be able to all right, here we go. Let's put our parking brake on. Let's pause my track IR. And let's kill the engine.
Engine off time logged. The flight is finished. It has been monitored by OnAir.
Okay, let's go over to OnAir. And the flight is now completed. The landing, very smooth actually, wasn't great. Okay, let's go back to jobs. And now we're going from this current airport, Mike, Papa, Echo, Juliet, back to Mike, Papa, Mike, Golf. So we'll do the exact same thing we did before. We'll hit the fly now button, or let's say this is the amount of time you have to fly. You could totally exit the game right here and rejoin this mission at a later point in time. It gives you a lot of flexibility if you don't have all day to fly. But for now, let's go ahead and hit the fly now button. we see here, I think we mentioned before, the price of the gas is $10.29 a credit. So we're not going to pick up a lot of fuel, if any. We do want to pick up a little, right? So we look at the bottom, it says range with 30-minute reserve, 63 nautical miles. I think, if I remember correctly, there is a scoring mechanism that wants us to have at least, is it 100 nautical mile reserve? So let's just bring in a little more gas because we can. So plenty available. And from here, once again, we can validate fuel and payload. Go back to fly now. And right from here, we can start tracking. So once again, let's do the same thing. I'll meet you at the very end of the runway. And from there, we can take off and complete this mission.
Dame ahí. A fuego, maquinita, a fuego. Yo te quiero dar, papi, sin miedo. Yo te quiero dar, papi, sin miedo. Ay, dale, 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 dale. Yo quiero romperlo, dale, dale. Ay, dale, 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 dale. Hazlo y grita, 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 dale.
Okay, just rejoining you now as we're getting ready to start our approach into the airport. About 2 minutes until top of descent. Unfortunately, on the takeoff roll and almost all the way here, I realized I had the microphone off. So I was talking to myself. I'm sure my wife wishes she had that ability for me. So I think I'll just probably throw in some cinematics for the takeoff. And in the interest of time, we'll just start this from here. All right, so once again, we've got our bottom altitude dialed in from 800 feet. 120 out. So we'll go ahead and start pulling back our power. Start slowing up a little bit. I'm also going to get dinged. I thought I pulled the flaps up, didn't look over and verified, and I rocketed right through our VFE of 154, so, which was a little annoying. All right, we're just starting to see the white diamond start to creep down a little bit. Says we have about 40 odd seconds to go. Bring in the first notch of flaps. Actually look over and make sure they come down. What a dumbass. it says we have another 5 miles to go as we hit top of descent. Vertical path is working. And we're coming down. I'll take this one. I think it's on our left-hand side here. All right, 1,000 feet to go. Our EFB. Okay, slight left turn. That looks correct. So it'll be only about 2.5 miles out from our final approach fix here. So let's go ahead and bring our gear down. As we continue around the turn. There's the airport straight ahead. Like magic. All right, under 124 knots. Second notch of flaps. Kick off the autopilot, and down we go. All right, I think I'm going to do slightly better on this landing now that the yoke is firmly attached to the desk. All right, got the pappies on the right, just slightly high, but that's okay. Airspeed's right on. Power out. A little bit long there.
Landing time logged.
Oh, I love FS Realistic. I think I mentioned on the last one. Very distinct Latin American tradition. They will actually clap as you land. Well, if you do a good job. So whenever I'm down in the DR or Puerto Rico, the very first thing I ask my flight attendants, I go, did I get any applause? All right, we'll just taxi right into the ramp here real quick. All right, I think this is good enough. All right, parking brake is on.
Engine off time logged. The flight is finished. It has been monitored by OnAir.
Shut down everything. So this is the end of the mission. And let's see how we did. All right, so we completed the mission. You can check specifically how I did, 91%. Not too bad. What am I missing here? Approach. Nav lights on. Forgot to get the nav lights on. All right, that's okay. We've made even more money. Got to look at a balance of 10,500. All right, so there's just a really quick rundown of how to accept multi-leg flights. In the next mission, I will return the aircraft back to Cartagena and we will pick up our very first aircraft. So let me know down in the comments what aircraft you'd like to see me fly. I'm thinking about keeping the Bonanza, maybe then going up to the 208 or maybe the Kodiak 100. I'm thinking about picking that up and then maybe moving our way up. Or would you like me just to kind of start off with a like the Caravan? You guys let me know down in the comments. Other than that, once again, I appreciate all the support I've been getting recently and how well these OnAir have been doing. And I will see you all in the next one as my voice disappears. All right, take care for now. Bye.